So Ad Astra, it looks like kind of like a space epic, and it is kind of a space epic, that akin to something like maybe like Gravity or Interstellar, and it definitely certain has that sort of like special effects wonder of going out into like the stars and seeing all these just these amazing vast areas of like space and just this great sense of something being bigger than you and exploring the universe. That's all there. But what I found most interesting about Ad Astra is that it's directed by James Gray. Now James Gray, he's directed stuff like The Immigrant and The Lost City of Z, which some people really love those films and other people are kind of on the fence about them. But what I love so much about those films is was that they were very cerebral. They felt very personal. Like they got into the minds of the characters, and you got to be there with them. There was a lot of humanity to those films, and thankfully, with Ad Astra, that same sense of introspection is here as well. And I'm so glad it's here as well because it seems like it could have gone astray. It seems like it could have just like this film could have veered off course and forgotten about its characters and just became just a fairly simple space epic of survival among the stars. But it actually develops quite a bit more than that. I was genuinely surprised by this film. So the premise is that it's sort of like the near future, and space exploration has become a little bit more commonplace. Like we don't have like warp drive and a whole bunch of like alien spacecraft and all that type of weird crap. We don't have lightsabers, but we do have like enough materials and resources where we can we can establish bases on like the moon and Mars, and we can make like civilian transports. It's still a little bit like rickety. They like all the rockets like look fairly believable here and there, and everything feels very rustic and like they're just starting out on these colonies. So I like that aspect. So you have like there's like a military base on Mars. There's essentially a mini city now on the moon that people venture to. And on Earth they have these basically just like giant space elevators they got that astronauts are working on. Now one of the people working with the American government on these projects is Major Roy McBride, and he's played by Brad Pitt. Now, they consider him a huge asset as an astronaut, mainly because he's unemotional. He's unemotional and he's calm. So there's several sequences where he's dealing with very dangerous situations. There's explosions and fire going off all around him, and he just remains cool and calm and in control. Like his heart rate doesn't rise. He doesn't become emotional. He just sticks to the plan and more or less ends up kind of saving the day. Well, they consider him an even greater asset because they found out that his father, played by Tommy Lee Jones, may be alive. They originally sent him on a mission to, I believe it was like around Neptune, to test out a space station, and they lost contact with the space station. It's later revealed, though, that they did make contact with the space station, and that his father's gone insane, and that the space station may be sending out these waves that are causing power surges throughout the universe, and vastly disrupting everything on Earth. Like it's resulted in like explosions and shuttles going awry and bases just losing power, and it's causing chaos. So they need to stop him, and they think that Roy might be the one to do it because he has a connection and he can remain unemotional where he won't let his feelings get in the way. Now you can kind of see how this type of story would be set up. Like it's just going to be like an adventure across the stars, and then he will try to like connect with his father. Maybe him and his father will try to like clash with each other once they finally meet, and then there'll be like a big fight and a giant explosion, and that kind of happens. But I love the fact that in this film we stay with Roy like the entire time. We stick within his head. We hear everything he hears and see everything he sees and feel everything that he feels. There's never a moment where we kind of like pull back too far from him. Now, on one hand, this kind of creates, because there's a lot of voiceover from Brad Pitt in this role, where they, where he talks a lot about himself and how he feels, and helps to explain the world that he lives within. But I love this kind of aspect because it lets us get to know a little bit more about the character, and it also better keeps the focus on this theme about men not feeling like themselves, like not coming to terms with their emotions, with their past, and how they kind of like view going out to the stars as kind of like an escape. Um, and so like the more I thought about this film, I couldn't help but be intrigued by it, because I think this film kind of, and it's in little bits and pieces. Like, I think it kind of does a great job kind of showcasing, getting into the mind of someone with autism. And I think, and I say that like genuinely, as someone who has autism, there's a lot of like interesting traits I noticed that he shares there. Like, one of the big things is that Roy is under constant psychological evaluation. Like, anytime he's done with the mission, or he's about to go on a mission, he has to go undergo this kind of like, programmed psychological test, to ensure that, that he's not going to fly off the handle, that he's not going to have any emotions, to keep his emotions in check. And it's clear that he has a problem with keeping those emotions in check, especially once eventually he finds out he's being lied to. And that information more or less comes from a friend of his father's, played by Donald Sutherland, who seems strangely more coherent in this film. Like, he's barely in the film, but he's in it just enough to kind of like be like the herald for this adventure and kind of like tell Roy the truth here. But I like that we hold on this, and like there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of other traits that are kind of similar. There's a few scenes where we showcase that he's distant from his wife, where he can barely talk to her, and that he can barely stand being touched by her, and it's more kind of out of like fear for coming to terms with his emotions. And I like that. It doesn't, like I said, like this film, it doesn't make itself plainly clear that Roy does have autism, but there is a lot that I saw within him in this film that does kind of resonate on that level. So I really appreciated that part. And like I said, this film, it could have gotten lost and gotten away from that, because there's so much else going on here. Like, he's got to make a stop in a moon base, where he's got to undergo a transport to a secret rocket, and he gets ambushed by moon pirates. And yes, this is a real thing. Like, there's a chase scene with moon rovers on the moon where they're firing back at each other, and it's essentially a battle for resources on the moon. Now, first, like, a lot of people have seen that scene and they thought like, okay, so this is gonna be like Mad Max Fury Road on the moon. Like, one of the first, like, I barely looked up anything for this film, and when I read like a little bit of the synopsis, somebody mentioned, oh, there's moon pirates. So I thought it was going to be that type of deal, something about like class structure and stuff like that. But no, it manages to keep focus too. It especially keeps focus when there's other little detours where it also could have gotten lost. Like, there's another detour where they got to make a stop at a scientific space station where they've lost all contact, and there's a dangerous situation that happens there. Now, for those of you who are worried that the film might be too cerebral, it is very... I like the fact that it is very dramatic. It does have beautiful visuals. It's surprisingly action-packed. There's a lot of scenes, like I said, there's like moon pirates, there's the chase scene, there's a fight scene in Zero G, which is actually pretty interesting, because a lot of people die in ways you don't expect, like like slamming too hard into a wall would kill you, or breathing in too much of like compromised air would kill you. So I love these tiny little aspects like that kind of like add to the environment. Like, there's never a moment where you don't feel like you're like the characters are in space here. Lots of great special effects, but again, the heart and soul of this film is just the focus on character, and kind of having this very like contemplative and quiet nature to it. Like, it starts fairly slow, and then it has bits and pieces of great action here and there, and then great bits of drama. Like, the climax of the film, when Brad Pitt finally meets Tommy Lee Jones, it doesn't end with like kind of like a knockdown drag out fight. It kind of ends with this very, very somber and somewhat sweet conclusion to their relationship, and trying to come to terms with themselves, and deciding like if trying to come to terms with like putting humanity above like your own emotions and your own connection to the world. And I love it. I mean, and again, like, I saw this in the IMAX screen, and I'm telling you, this is one of those films. It's like Gravity or Interstellar. You have to see this on the big screen, because if you don't, you're going to watch this at home and you're going to be like, oh, I feel like I'm getting half of the big experience here. Like I absolutely love seeing Gravity in the theater. It is that big of an experience, and Ad Astra is on that same level. I saw this film a week ago, and I've just been thinking about it nonstop. I cannot wait to go back and see this film again. It's definitely going to be one of my favorite films this year by far. So for Ad Astra, 4.5 out of 5 stars.